Welcome to the My Favorite Learners podcast, where pharmacology meets real-world anesthesia in a whole new way. Hi, I'm Chloe G. I'm here to shake up how we learn about drugs. No dry lectures, no endless memorization, just real conversations with CRNAs, pharmacology experts, and other healthcare pros who know their stuff. Whether you're a student, a seasoned provider, or just a pharmacology nerd, we're diving deep into the meds that make anesthesia happen. So grab your coffee, your curiosity, and let's talk drugs. Hello, my favorite learners. Today is a solo podcast, so don't be too disappointed I don't have a guest with me today. But I want to talk to you about one of my absolute favorite books on learning, Make It Stick by Brown, Rodinger, and McDaniel. This book completely changed the way I think about how we learn, how we remember, how we can apply knowledge in real life, especially in anesthesia and medicine. What I love about Make It Stick is that it challenges a lot of the myths that we've all believed about studying. Things like rereading and highlighting may feel productive, but they don't actually help us learn deeply. Instead, the author shows us evidence-based strategies that will really work, like retrieval practice, spacing out your learning, and mixing different topics as you study. Over the next few minutes, I'll walk you through some of the key takeaways from this book and connect them to what it means for us as anesthesia learners. Because the truth is, the way we study and practice matters just as much as the content we're trying to master. And if we can make our learning stick, we'll be better providers, safer clinicians, and more confident in the OR. Let's get into it. Hello, my favorite learners. Welcome back to another episode. And today I'm going to talk to you about some methods to help with studying and knowledge retention long-term, right? Because we want to understand the things that we learn in didactic and be able to apply them clinically as a student registered nurse anesthetist so that we can be some of the strongest, most competent providers clinically, right? I read the book, Make It Stick. If you've heard about Make It Stick, it's like this huge, trendy book to read right now. Would totally recommend it if you have not. But let's get into a couple things about Make It Stick that I think are pertinent to you, the learner. So, some core themes of this book. Learning should be hard to be effective. So that's why when you're reading your textbook, right? You're reading your textbook and you're falling asleep. You cannot physically keep your eyes open. Why is that? And that's because learning should be hard. If you're truly committing that to long-term memory, it's not easy. So remember that when you're slaving away over your study materials, okay? So the next core theme is testing yourself. So quizzing is better than reading. So that knowledge retention and having to remember the bits of the quiz are really helpful for long-term memory, okay? And then the last core theme is spaced practice. Go to bed. So let's get into all of these. There's another core theme called interleaving, which means you mix topics when you're studying so that you're not hyper-focused on one topic for a long period of time and then switch to another topic. You're kind of peppering each topic into your study materials. The next core theme is called retrieval and reflection. So again, pulling from memory kind of goes along with that quizzing aspect that I already discussed. And then lastly, the growth mindset. You can improve. So just changing your mindset and being able to think positively are all great ways to learn and commit these things to long-term memory. Okay, deep dive into each of these aspects and core themes. So let's talk about retrieval practice. So this is like the brain's workout, right? So we go to the gym and we work out our bodies. Working out your brain is doing things like this. So using practice tests or practice quizzes, using flashcards. I was a student that was notoriously in nursing school making index cards of 3x5s. I was the queen of 3x5s. However, they have apps these days that are very helpful in that, and I'll kind of go into that later. So let's talk about a pop quiz. If you've read this book before, what real life example is used in the beginning of the book to show how important it is to be able to retrieve information and memory in critical situations? So if you've read this book, what is the example they use at the beginning of the book? 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'll tell you. So at the beginning of this book, it opens up talking about a pilot and things are going wrong during the flight. Okay, I don't know, I think he loses an engine or something. And he has to be able to strategically think about what he's gonna do and how he's going to get out of this situation and land this plane with one engine. So that is the real life example in where retrieving information from memory is in critical situations is so important. And the same is, I was sweating. I was literally on the edge of my seat, like, my gosh, how's he going to get out of this? But in the OR, critical events do happen. It's kind of like driving a car. Most anesthetics run just fine, but sometimes there's a deer in the middle of the road and you have to know how to manage that in a crisis. which is what our goal as faculty and educators is to help you remember what we teach you so that you can use it for safe patient care. So that is our utmost priority. So that was a little quick retrieval practice if you've read the book and are able to actually retrieve that information. Okay, so this is another exercise that this is not my own, but someone gave to me, and it is like so helpful. Let me see how I can execute this. I'll just explain the exercise. How about that? We won't do it together. So this exercise says, on the next slide, you have 45 seconds to count the vowels. How accurate can you be? So now on this slide, there's a bunch of words, okay? And so I had told you 45 seconds to count all the vowels, okay? Then afterwards, how many words or phrases do you remember? Write them down on a piece of paper. Then we do it again. How many words or phrases do you remember this time? Write them down on a piece of paper. So this exercise basically emphasizes the importance of previewing. So previewing is essentially when you skim through things, or you kind of know what you're looking for while you're going into a study session. So for example, previewing PowerPoints before a lecture, looking at the questions before reading a paragraph for reading comprehension, things like that. So they say that if you're reading a book and there's questions at the end of the chapter, right? If you preview those questions first, when you read the chapter, you know what you're looking for and the overall learning is greater. So that is just a strategy and an exercise to show you that if you go into it knowing that I'm going to ask you about the words and the phrases and not just looking at the vowels, you get an overall bigger picture of learning and you remember more overall the second time during that exercise. Let's talk about retrieval practice. So some things that you can do for retrieval practice that are talked about within this book is a brain dump, okay? A brain dump is a form of retrieval practice where you write everything out as everything that you know about a topic, concept, or lesson. So as other topics push into your mind, put them on another list or paper. So basically, at the end of a lecture, and I'm gonna implement this with my students, so get ready, is at the end of a lecture, I'm gonna say, write down as much as you can remember about acetylcholine, right? So then they're like, right. It's easy at first, okay? You write everything down that you are fully familiar with, then it gets harder and harder as the minutes go on, right? So if you do a full 5 minutes of this, by the end of that 5 minutes, you're struggling to remember anything else, right? So then at the end, you almost have a cheat sheet of the things you don't need to study because you already know that about acetylcholine. You're able to retrieve that pretty quickly. The things that you forgot off the list or were low on the list may be things that you want to go over again and make sure you commit that to memory. So it's almost a better way to start effectively studying for exams by doing brain dumps. So I encourage you, get in a study group, do a brain dump, see how it works out for you. Maybe it is beneficial for your tool belt in nurse anesthesia school. I actually had my students, as a part of this lecture, write out everything that they knew to be a CRNA, or write everything you know about what it is to be a CRNA rather. And we actually practiced this in real time, which was kind of cool. This brain dump you can then take into mind maps and kind of connect all the pieces together and make like a beautiful, if you're artistic, you can make it your creative outlet. And then honestly, sometimes with those mind maps, for those of us like me with a photographic memory, when you're on exams, you can go, oh yeah, I drew a little brain next to this, and that's what that was. I drew a little receptor or a little acetylcholine molecule. You kind of can remember things based on this mind map from your brain dump. So mind map, brain dump. I'm gonna make merch that says all these things. Psych, I bet they're copyrighted. So I encourage you again to try and mind map with your brain dump and see how it works out for you in a study sesh. All right, now let's talk about spaced practice. So give it time. So how many times have you been sitting studying and you're like, I can't remember one more thing. I just went over this. Why can't I remember this? I just did this. I've done it myself a million times. And then what do? Forget it. I go to bed. Then the next morning I wake up, I look at the flashcard, I know it immediately. We need to give ourselves time and our brains time to absorb information and to actually be able to retrieve it and remember it in the long-term memory. For example, space time, I'm going to give you some examples. 1 hour per day for 6 days versus 1 6-hour cram session. That is the difference between spaced practice, okay? It's hard to do, but with Google Calendar these days and other Google Calendar apps, I really encourage you guys to take a little piece of content from whatever courses you're in and space it out so that you're actually able to retain that information in the long term. It'll be more beneficial for you and waste less of your time. So I do have a little calendar here, but I'm not going to show it. even on the YouTube channel. And the next is interleaving, so mixing it up. So the example that it gave in the book of Make It Stick is, and I sent it to my husband because for any of you that are sports fans, it talked about how a hockey player, for example, he was talking about how he would get frustrated with his coach because they'd be doing a certain drill, they'd almost get that drill, and then they'd move on to the next. And he's like, we were so close to like mastering that skill. Now we're on to the next skill. Like he would get frustrated with the coach. But this is exactly what interleaving does. So essentially you practice. You don't need to master it to move on to the next thing. You're almost doing surface level, so that the next time you go to it, moderate level. So that the next time you get to it, master level. So they actually did a study, and they talked about it in the book, of third graders, I think, throwing like cornhole, essentially. I might be butchering this. My retrieval practice isn't that great for this book. And they looked at two different groups of second graders, I think it was, or third. They're throwing these cornholes. So they wanted them to, the goal was to make it like, 3 feet, okay? So they had one group continuously practicing throwing it to 3 feet, continuously practicing, right? Over and over. They had the other group throw it at 2 feet and throw it at 6 feet and practice hitting the marks at each of those. And then they tested them. And the group that did better was not the group that consistently threw to that 3 feet mark, even though they were testing on that 3 feet mark. It was actually the students that had done a little bit of the 2, a little bit of the 6, and a little bit of the 3. So it kind of just shows that mixing it up and not doing the same thing repetitively is more beneficial in the long term in terms of skill or studying long-term memory, for example. So I have here a little calendar of what an interleaving schedule would look like, but essentially, like I said, it's for those 6 days, you do a little bit of pharm, a little bit of physio, a little bit of pharm, a little bit of physio, a little bit of pharm, a little bit of nursing or basics of anesthesia, and then a little bit of physio and a little bit of basics of anesthesia. Mixing it up throughout the week will help you retain this for long-term memory, because a 6-hour cram sesh is not fun for anyone and not beneficial for your time because you're not going to remember it as well. But it takes a lot of strategic planning. So, practical tips to summarize all of this. 1, quiz yourself. Use Anki, whatever you want to use. Space your studying. Go to bed if you have to. Switch up subjects. So do different subjects on different days for shorter periods of time instead of cramming. Mistakes are learning, okay? Mistakes are always learning. And then reflect after studying. What worked? What didn't? After an exam, okay, did this work? Did this not work? Did the mind mapping really work? You want to really do that for the next time. So reflect on that. So let's talk about the tools that I've already kind of mentioned, but retrieval tools. We talked about quizzing, right? There's Anki, which Anki is basically, from my understanding, I've never personally used it, so put them in the comments. But Anki is essentially a flashcard system, but it's an integrated system. So what I mean by that is that, or adaptive system, I should say, is that if you get it wrong, it will give it to you more frequently. If you get it right, it'll give it to you less frequently. So your stack starts to be what you need it to be, while also giving you easy questions or the ones that you already know throughout. It's just a little bit more of an adaptive flashcard system. Quizlet, I was the Quizlet queen of my class of 2016, and a lot of my colleagues did that. There's also Brainscape, Notion Q&A templates. Never use those, but those were recommended via ChatGPT. Some spaced recognition tools. Again, Anki is a good one. RemNote is another one. If you guys have used any of these, please put it in the comments on how it's helped you. Super Memo, and then Google Calendar. I personally use Google Calendar, so that's what I like to use. Now, let me try to pull up this TikTok so you guys can listen to it. This is by a creator called That Fit Nurse. Let's see if I can pull it up on here. I'm not sure how to do this. Okay, I'm gonna play it off the side and then I'm gonna copy and paste it later. Let's listen.
9 GPA in my first year in CRNA school, and this is what you're gonna do. Very first thing you're gonna do is download Anki onto your computer. Then you're going to download it onto your iPad and your phone, iPad if you have one. And then once you've done that, you're going to go to Canvas or whatever your school uses, and before the lecture, download the PowerPoint onto your iPad and upload it into Notability or GoodNotes or whatever you use. And then you're going to go through the whole PowerPoint and make flashcards in Anki on every slide. Now, this is a time-consuming process, but I promise you, if you want to be successful in anesthesia school, anything you do is going to be time-consuming. One way you can reduce the time you spend doing these cards is split it up among your friends. If your friends have Anki, split the PowerPoints up. You can share and export decks among yourselves. to help it go by faster. And you may not get through the whole PowerPoint by the time you have the lecture, and that's okay. But once you have the lecture and you have your additional notes that you took in class, make cards off of those as well. And then once you have your whole deck created, you're gonna study that all the way up until the exam. So it may be 2 weeks or 3 weeks up until the exam. And you'll do that for all of your classes, because I didn't just sit there and study that one deck every day for 3 weeks straight. I had other classes that I needed to make cards on, and I just kept rotating through them. And then probably about a week before the exam, I would specifically focus on that deck that I was about to have my test on and do it until I knew it really well. And I promise you, when you take the exam, it'll low-key be kind of fun, because you'll be like, oh my gosh, I know what is being asked. Now, you might not know everything, but it's an exam, that's normal. But once you start doing well on your exams, then it's gonna be motivating for you, because you're gonna see that you did well on the exam and you're gonna wanna do well on future exams. So it's like a positive feedback system. And whenever I needed a better explanation or I didn't quite understand something, I would either, one, go to the textbook and find where it was talking about in reference to the PowerPoint and just kind of read through and get a better understanding that way. Or I would go to ChatGPT and ask for a better explanation that way. But that's basically all I did. I would make all of my decks, and then the closer we got to the exam, I would focus more on that specific deck. And guess what? Come finals, you have all of those cards. You have them for the rest of your life, and whenever you need to study for finals, you just go and study that deck again. I know some people like to use all of the colorful markers and highlighters and pens, and that's totally fine. If that works for you, by all means keep doing it. I just never really had any success doing it that way, but I know a lot of people out there like doing that and it works for them. But once you find something that works well for you, don't change it. Don't fix something that isn't broken, right? But hopefully this was able to provide some guidance on what was successful for me and how I was able to make A's in all of my classes. But if you do decide to try this method out, now you don't have an excuse to not make an A on all of your exams. I believe in you. Good luck.
So as you can see, I'll put it right here for the YouTube channel, but this is a super great take on how you can use Anki to benefit you as a nurse anesthesia student, and how he's used it, split it up with classmates. All those things are such great recommendations so that you guys are able to be successful with your cohort altogether. So other interleaving tools that we can talk about. Notion table is one that came up, and also Trello board. So scheduling and time tracking. So these, again, are ways that you can schedule your time. It's going to take a lot of effort, just like he said. It takes a lot of effort up front, but then it's so beneficial in the long run. Some elaboration or generation tools, whiteboards or iPads, ChatGPT, clinical case study apps, all these things you can use them to work on the elaboration and the actual clinical component of putting all of these things into practice. Other things that you can use for dual coding are Canva. These are for brain maps and mind maps. You can use Canva, LucidArt, Miro, GoodNotes, Picmonic, or YouTube. All these different ways of using those things. The last thing is reflection. So daily journal apps, so Day One, Notion templates, or Google Docs. Also voice memos you can use to reflect. I'm a huge reflection person. I think it's so important for growth to reflect on how you're doing, how you're feeling, things that are working well, things that are not working well. Maybe we need a study buddy. Maybe we need to drop a study buddy. All of those things are super important and easy to do via reflection. Just do voice memos. Writing it down is not your thing. I'm too ADHD for that. But talking it out is always a thing for me, so I love to do that. Well, that is a wrap on this Make It Stick podcast. It's super short and sweet. I hope you guys get something out of it. I am going to put the Make It Stick by Henry Roediger. Oh my gosh, am I butchering that? And Mark McDaniel, Peter Brown. I am going to put a link to it if you want to purchase it. I think I have an affiliate link, but you can also just buy it on your own. I totally 10 out of 10 recommend. We make all our students at the place that I'm currently a faculty member at, we make all the students read it and do this book club prior to starting school so we can start you off on the right foot. So anyways, my favorite learners, my piece of encouragement to you is that you got this seat for a reason. This seat in an anesthesia program was not easy to obtain, and 100 people thousands of people wish they were sitting in your seat right now. So although it may be hard, although it may be difficult, put it into perspective that this ICU nurse in you would die to be where you are right now. So you got this, you can do this, and I'll see you next time. Hello, my favorite learners. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute medical or professional advice. While we strive for accuracy, medicine is constantly evolving and clinical decisions should always be made based on current guidelines, institutional policies, and individual patient considerations. The views expressed are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any affiliated institutions. Listeners should consult their own healthcare providers before making any medical decisions.